Yo, what up? It's your boy, Mike the Mentor, coming at you for the Sunday sermon. Hope you guys are putting the end to a good weekend. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're watching, hashtag live. If you're watching live, hashtag replay. If you're checking out the replay, I appreciate you guys sharing these videos and helping me as I just share these truths, right? These experiences that I've been through. If you guys are new to this page and this is your first time seeing one of my videos, hey, welcome. Thanks for checking this out. So my story is I grew up without a father for most of my life. He was in prison three different times until the age of 10. Then he got out and disappeared. Didn't really hear too much from him. And he came back in my life around the age of 14, 15. And those are very impressionable years to a young man. Probably more so than the developmental years that they say you experience up to age 6. Looking for direction, trying to figure this thing out called life, this thing called manhood. My dad shows up, and through a series of events, his tenure in our house was very short-lived, and it ended up with him picking up a giant rock, throwing it through the front window of our door, screaming obscenities at my mom, ripping off his shirt because he was higher than a kite, and just acting kind of crazy. I wouldn't say kinda, he was acting crazy. And my mom called the police on him, and he jumped in his truck and took off down the road and disappeared. And he didn't reappear back in my life until I graduated from high school 2 years later, and gave me the same old song and dance he had given me his whole life. I'm gonna be there for you. I'm gonna be there for your brother and your sister. I'm gonna be a good dad. Now that I'm older, I'm not angry with him. You can only give what you have. And I don't know much about his background. I don't know much about his upbringing. But for whatever reason, he didn't have that inside of himself. He didn't know what it took to be a good father, to be a good husband. And I made a vow that I was never going to be like him. So he disappeared shortly after that, high school graduation, showed up 2 years later when my brother committed suicide, disappeared again, then showed up 2 years later at my college graduation. But this time it was a little bit different. He had been diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer, and he was no longer the young looking dad I remember. He's always way younger looking than what his age revealed, and now his skin was shrunk, like almost like saran wrap against his cheekbones. His eyes were sunk in the back of his head. I mean, he couldn't have been more than 110 pounds, if I had to guess. And his life was short, and soon after that he died. And it was at his funeral that I had to come to grips with what it meant not really having my dad there in my life, and face that head on. And man, it was like a tidal wave, right? As I said my last respects to him, and then I came back and sat down at my chair and just started crying profusely. And I was so angry. I was so angry. And all the memories of my life were like flashing in front of me. And he wasn't in very many of them, but every time I'd see a memory of him and then disappear, I'd get madder and madder. And I just sat there with my fists clenched and my head down in my knees, just letting out, right? This 23 years of hurt, 23 years of being let down, 23 years of being told one thing and then doing another thing, 23 years of disappointment. It all just was coming out of me, and it was a very profound moment because I was like, this guy in this box knows nothing about me. And I had a very interesting spiritual experience at that time, and I was one of two times in my life that I heard God speak clearly to me, and he said to me, I know everything about you. And for whatever reason, all that anger, all that hurt, all that disappointment, it all disappeared in an instant, and immediately peace came over me, and I was good. I had my joy back, right? That doesn't mean the hard work was done, not by any stretch of the matter, but I was instantly a different person. And that was the start of, well, it wasn't the start, but it was the next progression in me trying to figure out what it meant to be a man on my own, and not having a father figure in my life to really show me that. And this page is a culmination of all those things that I've learned along the way, that I'm sharing with anybody that will listen, because the world outside is crazy, and the reason it's crazy is because men haven't stewarded their responsibilities as fathers, as husbands, and as leaders of this community. And that's why we have all this crazy stuff going on. And whether we like it or not, we have a higher calling on our life. We are called to greater responsibility as men. And if this world is going to change, if things are going to change, then we need to step up. We need to look ourselves in the eyes, in our mirror in the morning, and make a resolve inside of ourselves that we're going to do something different today. So the Sunday sermon is just me sharing different things that have been placed on my heart, subjects to talk about. And I call it a sermon. It's not really like a go-to-church type of sermon, even though sometimes I do talk about God. But it's really just something for you to reflect on and to think about, and I hope it makes a difference in your life. So let's jump in to today's Sunday sermon and see what it's all about. Alright, so we're in week 31. Man, it's crazy. Time is flying since I started this the 1st of January. Here we are 8 months and 11 days later, and we're not stopping. And what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about unforgiveness, because I think especially as men, we downplay this and the effects that this has on our life. And secondly, because as men, in Western society especially, we're told to buck up, to pull ourselves up from the bootstraps, to be tough, all these things, which I don't necessarily disagree with, and they're appropriate at times, but that has caused a culture of men who lie to themselves and lie to others. We lie about how we're feeling. We lie about what we think. We say things like, and tell me if these sound familiar, oh, that doesn't matter. Oh, it's no big deal. It's okay. When really that's not what we think or how we feel inside at all. And because we're lying to ourselves in regards to our feelings, we're often not able to identify that we're living with unforgiveness, because we're not as in tune with our emotions as women tend to be, right? Because they take that time to develop those things, whereas we're encouraged to push those things aside. So unforgiveness, right? So I think a good picture of this is represented like this, right? And this guy is pulling a bus with his head, right? And this is a good picture because for most of us, this is life. We're going through our lives trying to go somewhere, trying to do something with ourselves, and the whole time we're dragging along this unforgiveness that we have in our hearts that is just weighing us down. whether we can identify it or not. I would bet that 90% of the people can't identify that they have unforgiveness, but they know something is there. They know something is bothering them. They know something is not right, but they just can't put their finger on it. And this affects every area of our lives, right? It affects how we feel physically. It affects how we interact with people. It affects how we show up at our jobs and our places of work. It affects, how we love our spouses. All this stuff. It's like a subtle poison that seeps into our lives and then slowly destroys us, especially as men. And the further we continue to lie about ourselves and how we feel and what we think. So I want to share this quote with you, and it's a book that one of my mentors gave me. He wrote this book. It's his own personal story. It's called The Power of Forgiveness, The Key to Ultimate Freedom. And I've shared this before, but when he was 16, he was working at a grocery store, and two guys came in to rob it. And they took him by gunpoint and knife point and brought him back to the cooler. And as one brother proceeded to rob the grocery store, the other brother held him captive with the knife to his neck. And before the brother with the gun went to rob the store, it was a very traumatic, the whole thing was traumatic experience, but, when they took him captive, they were having this discussion in front of him whether they were going to let him live or whether they were going to kill him, right? And this is a fight or flight type of moment, where his adrenaline's pumping, and all he can do, never have been in that situation before, is believe them and believe that he is going to die, right? And eventually, the guys rob the store. They tie him up, leave him back there, and then they leave. And then he's rescued later when the police come, and luckily no one was killed. But this experience in his life had a profound effect on him through the rest of his life. And I don't mean just the PTSD that he suffered, PTS, I think, whatever the acronym is for that, post-traumatic syndrome, PTS, followed him throughout his life. But even more importantly than that, the unforgiveness that he had in his heart towards those two guys who did that to him. And it's an incredible story about how he, over, I want to say like 30-something years, he had to deal with this, right? And come to the conclusion that if he was ever going to get over this experience in his life and let that not hold him back anymore, he would need to forgive those two robbers. Now, that doesn't mean that this is a big misconception that people have about forgiveness. They think that when you forgive somebody, you automatically say that what they did to you is okay. And that can't be further from the truth. That does not erase what they did to you and make it okay. But what it does do is it takes you out of the place of judgment over their lives. And you no longer hold that against you. And I can't tell you how much freedom is found in that when you choose to forgive someone and you let that go. But he has this quote, and I thought it was so appropriate, and it says, "Memories run deep, but forgiveness runs deeper." I mean, it's incredible, right? So I want to share two stories with you of unforgiveness in my life and how that affected me. And then I want to wrap this up by giving you some practical tips that I've learned, some tools that can help you unpack any unforgiveness that you are dealing with in your life, and help you discover any unforgiveness that maybe you didn't realize was there, or it's just been so long that it's just been commonplace and you've been carrying this thing around. and now you can finally drop it off, and you can continue to step into the man that God created you to be. So, the first story, when I was in ninth grade, I had a new teacher at school. She was a very nice lady. She was an exceptional teacher. I mean, she cared about us, but she was what they call fresh fish. And I was in this class with not a good combination of guys. Not that the guys were bad. It's just you put all of us together in a room, and it's just mischief, I guess, is what I would say. So we were in this class, right? And this teacher, as she was trying to figure out what it was like to run a classroom and to have authority or use her authority and all that stuff that comes with being a first year teacher, she afforded us a lot of grace, and we literally abused that to no end. And one of the things that we did was, sorry, just gonna change this back here, so get to that back in a minute. But one of the things that this did was it allowed us to take advantage of her kindness. So what we did is we got into this habit of, instead of swearing, right? So instead of saying, excuse my language, shit, for example, we would say ship, right? Or instead of saying the F word, we would say puck. And we would substitute these words into our sentences, so basically we could swear without swearing. And the other guys in my class, they were way more smoother than me. They were way more funnier than me. And for whatever immature reason, when they did it, it was just hilarious. But then there was me, and I always had to try to get my little thing in and get a little bit of attention, right? So I'm not saying this as an excuse, because it's not an excuse by any means. I just want to give you context to where I was at and where my mindset was at. You know, ninth grade was not at school, but at home was extremely hard for me. 9th, 10th, 11th grade. You know, I just had a lot of stuff going on at home, and often I would bring that to school and not deal with it in the best way. And looking back, it's crazy, you know, how much grace I was shown. You know, I wouldn't say that I was the worst of the worst kids, you know, but I definitely wasn't the best of the best kids. I was mischievous, you know, ninth grade, trying to figure out all these dynamics with girls and peer pressure and older people, and I knew a lot of the older kids and just all this stuff, right? So I come to school, something had happened that morning. I was pissed. Did not come to school in the right frame of mind. And our teacher had been warning us about us doing that, right? So the first couple of times she would laugh and kind of giggle along and ha ha ha, you know, and then finally it was like, all right guys, like enough is enough. So that was what the type of morning that it was in the classroom. And I just remember a kid, I'm getting up, and one of the kids asked me to sharpen his pencil. And I'm not going to repeat what I said to him, but it was not very appropriate. And it was a mix of the swearing but not swearing and something else. And the teacher yelled at me, and yelled at me pretty good, right? And I had it coming, because she had told us to stop, and I didn't, and I just did this, right? So one of the things that made this teacher really cool is she was extremely vulnerable with us. She shared a lot of her personal life story with us, and she had somewhere in the weeks or the months leading up to that had come off of a miscarriage. And when she started yelling at me, I don't know if I blacked out, I don't know what, but I opened my mouth, and I said, I remember exactly what I said. I said, maybe if you weren't such a beep, you wouldn't have had a miscarriage. Tell you what, I mean, I don't know how she didn't just punch me straight in the face. But her face welled up with tears. Um, she started to cry, and she pointed to the door, and she choked out, "Get out!" And I didn't need to hear it twice. You know, I knew that I had crossed a major line. So I grabbed my stuff and I went down to the principal's office and told the principal what I did. I got put in in-house suspension. The principal went and talked to the teacher, and this was a year-long class. So for the rest of the year, I had to stay in in-house suspension. She didn't want to see me. She didn't want to hear from me. She didn't want to be around me, rightfully so, right? So I don't know. Like I guess any teenager, I go on with my life, right? And I don't think about it. Maybe I did at the time, but what I'm saying is my life continues to move forward like everyone's life, right? So over the years, every now and then God would prompt me in that, and I would think about that, and I'd be like, man, I need to ask that lady for forgiveness, that teacher, but I'd never do it. I'd never follow through. Man, I was scared out of my mind, and so years and years go by. We moved back here to Michigan to this house, and it's no sooner that I get my desk put together and I sit down to start doing some work, and God prompts me again. He's like, "Hey, you need to go find that lady, that teacher, and apologize to her and ask for forgiveness." And I'm like, like, okay, so get on the computer. Try to see if she's around the area, but I only knew her by her maiden name. Reached out to people on Facebook, was like, hey, does anyone know if this teacher's still around? Someone hit me back and said, yeah, she is. She works at the high school. This is her last name now. So I'm like, okay, perfect. Go on to the school website, look up her name. There's her email, there's her number. I'm gonna write her an email. Go to write her an email. God's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing what he told me to do. I'm going to apologize and ask for forgiveness. And he's like, no. He's like, you're going to be a man and you're going to go up there and you're going to speak to her face to face. And I'm like, I can't do that, right? Like, I can't. She's going to kill me. All these things your mind makes up and like your mind tells you to prevent you from doing this, right? And he's like, no, you need to go up there. Finally, I just relented and said, okay. And I called and made an appointment to see her, and I go up there, and, we have a little bit of small talk, and then I tell her, hey, I came up here because I need to apologize to you for something. And I proceed to ask her if she remembers what happened. She's like, yeah, I remember like a little bit, but I don't remember, exactly what happened. And I can feel inside like God just nudging me. He's like, you need to tell her exactly what you said. So I did. I told her, and I'm like, well, I remember exactly what I said, and here's what it is, and I'm just waiting for this lady to be like, cuss me out, drop the F-bomb, whatever. I mean, tell me to get out once again, right? And so I tell her that, and then after I tell her, I'm like, I came up here because I want to tell you that I'm sorry that I said those hurtful things to you. They were uncalled for, and I shouldn't have did it. And I was wondering if you would forgive me. And man, that 3-second pause between me asking that and waiting for her to answer was like an eternity. I mean, my heart is just crushing out of my shirt. And she looks at me and she says she accepts my apology and that she can forgive me. And if you've ever had to ask somebody for their forgiveness and they've forgiven you, the weight that just melts off your shoulders, right? This is something that I had been carrying around for 15 15 years, I think. Longer than that, 18 years since this event happened. Huge weight off my shoulder. So there's my first story of unforgiveness, right? Or forgiveness. Um, yeah, so that was the first one on my side, asking for forgiveness and her forgiving me. So now I want to tell you a quick story about unforgiveness. So it's 2016. I'm at a men's retreat, and I'm serving on the staff there. And I'm in the staff bunkhouse, and I'm sleeping, and I'm in this dream. And in this dream, man, I'm just working out. I'm sweating. This guy who's working me out in the dream, it's funny. He was one of the other staff members at the men's retreat, and he was, I want to say he was a colonel in the army before, or the army before he retired, right? So I mean, he's like he's one of those guys, like, and he's just one thing after another, drill sergeant, just crushing me. And so I get done, I go off the area where we're working out, back by where these benches are, and then next to these benches there's these stationary bikes. And I sit down on the bench, and I start to undo my shoes to change out. And a lady is riding a stationary bike, and she looks at me and she says, "Man, that must have been hard." And naturally, I think she's talking about the workout. So I just said, "Yeah, that was tough, but I really like working out hard. Uh, I love it when he tries to crush me. That's how I want to go. Just get it in, get it done, and go hard." And she's like, "No, I don't mean that at all." And she pauses, and I look at her, and then she goes, "I mean your brother's letter." And immediately I wake up from this dream, and I can't stop crying. I can't. Um, I would say anybody that knows me, I wear my feelings on my sleeve, but it takes a lot for me to get to that point where I'm going to cry. So now that I'm getting older, I find myself being more emotional. It's funny how that works. But I hadn't cried in a really long time, and I cannot stop from crying. And so I didn't want to interrupt the other guys, so I go outside the bunkhouse, and someone had set up this hammock, and I lay down in this hammock, and I'm still crying, and I can't stop. I mean, the pain is so fresh and so real. And what the lady was alluding to in the dream when she said my brother's letter is when my brother committed suicide, and we came home from the high school that day, and dealing with all of that, we were downstairs in my grandma's basement, and we were just trying to watch some TV and have some sense of a normal evening. And I just got to thinking, like, because up until a certain point in the day, like, I didn't want to believe my brother would do that. Like, that shit wasn't like him. And so my logical mind was like, there has to be an answer. He would not just do this for no reason. And I got up and I went down the hallway into his room, and I started searching the closet, searching through his drawers, and then I put my hands on his desk, and my right hand bumps the mouse, and up comes the computer screen. And on the computer screen is this letter that he wrote, addressing the family, addressing my grandparents, addressing me, addressing my sister. And so I start to read through this thing because I just want to know why. I'm looking for an answer. And he didn't leave an answer. This was kind of like him just saying goodbye, and what his wishes were for each one of us and our family. And I broke. I don't think I cried up until that point, but I'm pretty sure I crawled back down the hallway into my grandma's living room and laid there in the fetal position. And my mom and my sister were wondering what was going on. They were trying to get me to talk. I couldn't stop crying, and all I could do was point down towards the hallway. And they got up and they ran down the hallway, and soon enough they know exactly what was getting me so emotional. Um, so that's what the lady was alluding to in the dream. And all those feelings had come back in an instant as I had dreamt and then laid there in the hammock, looking up at the sky, wondering what the heck was going on. And I started to ask God, God, what's up with this? Why did I have this dream? Why all these years later would I be so emotional about this? Why would this be so raw? And he spoke to me, and he told me that I had unforgiveness. And I started a dialogue, right? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, God, I don't have any unforgiveness. Like, I'm one of the most laid back people I know. I don't try to hold a grudge. I mean, just want to forgive people and move on and all that, right? And he's like, you have unforgiveness. And I'm like, getting frustrated. I'm like, unforgiveness. I don't have who do I have unforgiveness towards? And as soon as I said that, he responded and said, yourself. And I started to cry more because he was right. I had just stuffed it so far down inside of myself that I had forgotten that it was even there. And I had unforgiveness towards myself because I thought I wasn't there for my brother when he needed me. And I had never forgiven myself for that. And in the days surrounding my brother's suicide, I just went into my default mode, which is take care of everybody else. Don't worry about what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And I never finished processing that, right? I took that and I just stuffed it in. And here it was, all these years later, coming right back up to the surface, right? And it really was a gift, though, because this was something that I had been carrying around that had been affecting me in ways that I had not connected the dots up until that point. And God was revealing that to me as a gift because He wanted to give me the opportunity to get rid of that and to leave that there and to move forward with the help of some of the other leaders the next day, I was able to process that and do that. So that's the second story. So now what I want to do is I want to share with you guys some practical steps that you can take that will help you do the same thing, let me see here. So like anything that I'm always presenting to you guys, like I believe these things to be true. I know that if you're willing to challenge yourself and to do these things, they will help you. But like any good mentor, I'm going to suggest these to you, but I'm not here to force these upon you because you have your own walk, you have your own journey, and maybe for some of you guys, I'm just here to plant these seeds like they were planted in me. And whenever they choose to be watered and to start to blossom, then so be it. That maybe that's not my responsibility tonight or the part I play. So the first one that I want to suggest is that you get alone with God. And when I mean alone, I mean no cell phone, no music, no distractions. I mean, get alone. Get out of your house. If you can, I don't know why it is, but go in the woods. Get out in nature. Like, there's something about being out in nature and not having the distractions of the world that come with having your phone or music that just puts you in this environment where you're more easily and able to receive what God wants to share with you. So there's this verse in the Bible. It says from Psalms 139:23. It says, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." Right? And I believe that. And furthermore, I believe that because God knows you so intimately, that if you ask Him to spend time with you, He will. Because that's all He's looking for. He just wants to have a relationship with you. So when you get alone, you know, and maybe you don't know what to say, this is what I say. I just talk to God like He's my dad. I say, "Dad, I just need you to spend some time with me. I need you to show me something. I need you to speak to me about this situation. I need your advice. I need to know what to do." That type of language. And then I just shut up. And I'll either sit there, I'll walk, depending on what type of mood it is, but I'll just be quiet so I can let these things stir up, and I can let Him stir these things up inside of me and start to show me pictures and, speak to me in my mind's eye, all these different things. Sometimes I've even had people come across my path unexpectedly and say things to me. So, ask God. So what you want to do is, specifically if you're dealing with unforgiveness, right, is you want to ask God to show you if you have any unforgiveness in your heart towards yourself or to others. And He's going to be faithful, and He's going to show it to you. You might not, I'm not guaranteeing you're going to like it, right? But ask and you shall receive, and then it's up to you to do something with it. And I believe if you're still watching this video, you're either fascinated by what I'm telling you, or you can relate to this, and you want to move into tomorrow or the next part of your life not having these things affect you as a father, as a husband, as a leader in your community, as a man, or maybe even if you're a woman watching this, in your roles that you assume each and every day. So whatever He shows you, right, be courageous. Like when He told me about my teacher going to apologize and ask for forgiveness, right? That took a lot of courage to do, right? Probably more so than me dealing with the unforgiveness. Well, that was way harder than me dealing with the unforgiveness towards myself. But whatever He shows you, be courageous. And then what you need to do, right? It's one thing to know something in your mind, right? Like, so I knew for a number of years that I had to ask that teacher for forgiveness. But it's another thing for you to be a man and make a decision to deal with it and lay it down, right? Once you choose to deal with this and then you deal with it, whatever way is revealed to you, you go and you do that, and then you leave that thing there. You don't pick it back up. You let it go. It's been dealt with. You've given it away. It doesn't belong to you anymore. And then I would make a suggestion to you that you repent and ask for forgiveness. right? Whether that's to the person or whether that's to yourself, however God makes this clear to you. And then finally, uh, when you've done that, right, and you've asked for forgiveness, you want to speak a blessing over that person that you've had unforgiveness towards, right? That's the way that you seal this thing off, and you cut all attachment to it, right? Because the Bible talks about the power of speaking a blessing over somebody else. And if you have hate in your heart towards somebody, if you have unforgiveness in your heart towards somebody, the last thing you want to do is speak a blessing over that person. But you'll know that you've dealt with this unforgiveness and that you've truly turned it over to God when you speak a blessing over that person. So what I would suggest is, you know, speak a blessing over them as a person. Speak a blessing over their family. Speak a blessing over their career. Speak a blessing over their relationship with God. You know, and just use whatever words come to you. This doesn't have to be some holier than thou type thing. Just do it from the heart. You know, and do that. Right? And watch this thing melt off of you. Watch this thing disconnect from you. Watch your life start to change, man. I mean, just the joy you begin to experience, it's hard to describe the lightness that you're going to walk around with from going through this exercise. And then finally, right, so you had this unforgiveness in your heart towards this person. You just removed that and pulled it out. And now what you need to do is you need to ask God to fill that spot with something else. And that something else is His love, right? Because love is the most powerful force in the world, and on the planet. And what this world needs more of today is love and honor. So yeah, that's it for tonight. I know that this can be challenging. I tried to give you, some good examples of how this has played out in my life, on how I've had to show up and be the man by being willing to do this and to stare these things in the face and then not only acknowledge them, which is scary in its own right, but then walk them out, right? And I wouldn't have it any other way. I wish in some aspects I would have did apologize to that teacher sooner, right? But I can't tell you the freedom that my life has now because of that, of asking for that forgiveness, and then my own experience with the unforgiveness towards myself. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Long one tonight for the Sunday sermon, but I love you guys. If you need anything, hit me up. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow for My Life Monday. Have a good night.